Happy Sunday, Silver Tubers. It's Mr. Zeke coming to you from the Silver Pouring Bench. Actually, that's not entirely true. Coming to you from the dining room table. Over the years, I've had a lot of questions as to what furnace I use. A lot of new pourers have asked in videos what brand furnace or model furnace I use. And so I thought I would share a little adventure with you guys. I've done a lot of work to my furnace over the years. I started with a basic 30 ounce tabletop furnace. This is the furnace. And basically you have the brain down here and then the chamber, the burn chamber on the top. And as you can see, if you've ever seen a tabletop furnace, most of the time the fans are black. I've already replaced the fan once. The original fan burned out and it's about due for another one. I want to make something clear right off the bat. No furnace is going to last forever without some kind of repairs. They're a mechanical instrument, and as with all mechanical instruments, they wear out. This one is due. Basically what happens, the way these furnaces work is they have a thermostat down here, or a control unit down here, a power switch, and a cooling fan to keep the lower half cool while the upper half is getting really, really hot. The upper half is known as the burn chamber. And you can see when I first got this years ago, it was a nice polished stainless steel look, and it's natural for them to take on a bit of coloration as they get hot and cool off and hot and cool off. But when I got this, they only had certain sizes. They had a 10 ounce, a 30 ounce, a 60 ounce, a 100 ounce. And I wasn't happy with that because I wanted to use different size crucibles. So I modified mine. I took a Dremel and I cut back the lips here. I saved the pieces that I cut off. You can see how much I actually cut off. This would have been like that. I cut these off so that I could lift out the top, and this top is wedged in here pretty good. I put it in the wrong way. Just broke it. Yeah. That's okay though, because that's what we're here for today. And that's your top. They have since gone to the Pro Deluxe or Deluxe Pro or some such jazz where you can take the tops out and put them back in. But looking down, and the filming on this is going to be a little bit rough, you can see the actual burn chamber. Now that metal you see down in there coiled, that's called the coil. That's the heating element. And that's what heats up the graphite crucible. Now these coils, this is I think my third coil. They do wear out over time. Every time they go through a cycle, they heat up and they cool down and they begin to warp, and they're held in with staples, and eventually you get this effect. You can see down in there where the coil has actually pulled out of the grooves. On the inner burn chamber, there are grooves around for the coils to fit into, and when they pull out of that, you run the risk of two of the coils touching and shorting out, and that's usually the end of your pouring for that day, because you're going to need to replace the coil. What I'm going to do today, and I thought I would bring you guys all along for this, is I went ahead and it was time for a new coil, but I've spilled some silver in there. It doesn't hurt much as long as it's not a lot. I've lost enough silver in through a bad crucible before to have the silver leak out in between the burn chamber and the brain unit down below. And in doing that, it shorted out the this piece here. This is called the thermocouple, which is a fancy name for a thermostat. This piece you will see as we disassemble this sticking up right here, and that tells the brain what the temperature inside the burn chamber is. And that's how you control, that's how the brain controls how much current to put through the coil. So I went ahead and called Dave over at PMC and said, hey, it's time for a new coil, but I think I'm going to go ahead and can I replace the burn chamber? And he said, absolutely. You can do it one of two ways. You can send us the unit, and for, I think it's $150 or so, we will rebuild the furnace, or, for a little bit less, we can send you a complete upper insert, with top and insulation for the top, and you can put it in yourself. Well, I'm not big on having other people do something that I can do for myself. So knowing that I've replaced a lot of the coils, I've even replaced a thermocouple. I burned out a thermocouple. I decided I would do it myself, and I would take you guys along for the ride. So that's what we have in store for today. If you're not a pourer or you're not interested in how these work, then you can go ahead and stop the video now. This is going to be, it's either going to be a longer than average video, or it's going to be a two-part video. But this should be fairly simple. All I'm going to need is some needle nose pliers, which I've got several different styles, longer handle, shorter handle, and then the thicker ones. And then a basic screwdriver, complete with flashlight. So, like I said, if you're not interested, no biggie. I don't mind. I know this isn't everybody's rodeo, but if you do have a tabletop furnace and you do plan on pouring for quite some time, or even for just a little while, this may educate you and help you along the process, and it can also help you troubleshoot if something's wrong with your furnace. So I'll be back in a minute and we'll get to working. All right, so here we go. First step to the project today is to make sure it's unplugged. We do not want to be working on our furnaces while they're plugged in, obviously, but nothing is less common than common sense. So in doing this, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to disconnect the brain from the burn unit. So we're going to want to disconnect the thermocouple, and then in the back, we'll get to it, the two leads that run to the coil. The thermocouple is very simple. You simply have two connections, one here. Try to get a little better picture for you. There you go. You have one here and one here, and those are nothing more than just Phillips head screws. So we're going to loosen those up and pull the wires loose. The wires should just slide out just like so, and you can just leave those hanging just like so. Now we're going to flip it over, and you're going to see there's where the power comes into the coils. And these are kind of, I crimp them so I get a good connection, so it takes a little bit to pull them apart. I want to make sure I'm holding onto the bottom, because the bottom is the piece that I don't want to get damaged. Because the top unit comes with new connections. And so that's one. And that's two. So now it's disconnected. So now I'm going to remove the lower unit. And the lower unit is simply, zoom back out, screws on each side, and then this lower unit will slide out. So we're going to go ahead and take the screws out. One, two. These are short little screws. They're just sheet metal screws. Okay, so there's my three. I'm going to set them over here. Get to the other side. This little Craftsman. You can do this with a hand screwdriver. I'm just trying to save time, so I used one of my little electric screwdrivers. So now, as I lift up, the lower unit, or the brain, if you will slide out, and we're going to set that off to the side. There's the brain. This has all the controls in it and everything. And now I have the burn chamber by itself. So let's zoom back out. That's zoomed all the way out. Okay. So open the top. You can already see insulation falling out. And that's okay because all this white is going to come out. So I'm going to take the screws. There's 4 screws on each side. I'm going to take the screws out of one side because I'm not entirely sure. This is all going to come out of here. I'm not entirely sure I want to take the whole top apart. I think I can get away with just doing one side. Ooh, that's tight. Those are tight screws. I might have to, yep, I'm probably going to have to get an actual screwdriver. No, there we go. There's one. And they're all the same size screws. They're all the same type of screw. And this is going to start to sag because I'm literally taking one of the supports off. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? We disconnected the thermocouple. I do not want to strip the screw out. So I'm going to pause this for a second. I'm going to get an actual screwdriver. Hang tight. Okay, so that side's off. And because this is wrapped around, I'm going to have to take both sides out. But before they do that, I need to disconnect. Let me get this oriented correctly. I need to take the thermocouple off, which is literally just 2 screws up from the bottom. And they're a little bit longer because they've got to fit through the length of that thermocouple. There's one on each end. And the thermocouple should slide right out the bottom. So there's the old one. This is actually the second one. And the rebuild kit came with a brand new one. So there you have it. Excuse me. So now we've got insulation already coming out. You're going to make a bit of a mess with this insulation, so be prepared for that. We're going to flip this over, and we're going to take the other side off. So there's number 1, number 2, like I said, this is going to be a longer video than normal. And number 4. And so there's the other side to the furnace. So now we have just the burn chamber here. Okay. And now it's just a matter of pulling it apart enough to get the actual insulation out. And so I'm going to do that out in the garage because it's going to make a mess because these walls are going to just come apart when I pull this out of here. So I will be back with the burn chamber removed and we'll put the new burn chamber in. Hang tight. So there you have it. You've got basically the shell of the original furnace. And it's time to insert the new burn chamber into the shell. One thing they did recommend when I was talking to Dave on the phone is be very careful with this. The only thing holding it together are the staples that they use to hold the coil in. They tape it together for shipment, so I have to remove all this tape. So it's going to sit in like so, but I'm not going to actually show putting it in because I got to take the tape off and hold it in place. Well, let's see if we can't do that. I'd rather you guys get to see it all than just part of it. So I'm going to lay this on its side. I'm going to very carefully untape it because I'd like this to be as comprehensive as possible in case any of you ever decide to undertake this yourself. But I want to also maintain the integrity of my furnace. And this is a fun task to do while trying to make sure the camera is in focus and focused on the correct parts. So yeah, you got to be real careful with this because it's loose. Once you take the tape off, there's nothing holding it together. It's meant to be held together inside the box, and I don't want to mess up the coil, which is stapled in place very gingerly, and so you can already see it's starting to move a little bit. So now we're going to force this, and you have to sort of pry the see, I'm getting a little bit of play here. You have to pry this apart a little bit to get that burn chamber in there, but once it's in, it should be good. But you don't want to tear up the burn chamber putting it in. This stuff is very fragile, and you can end up shredding it a little bit. I'm not too worried about losing a little bit, but I don't want to lose a lot. So that's basically inserting the burn chamber into the, and you want to make sure that your leads in the bottom here are not catching as you push this down in. See, now you've got the two leads on the bottom and your hole for the thermocouple, but it will spread. It has spread some, which is normal because it is sheet metal, so the sides will pull it back in when we screw the sides together. Now we have the in a separate package, we have the four tops, or the four, these are what your tops rest on, and these fit right in like so. And that'll let you know when you have it down all the way. You have one for each side, like so. And there's some fitting involved to get those in place. That's when you know that the burn chamber's pushed down all the way. These will fit into underneath your framework like so. So I will be back. I'm going to get these in, and then we can put the sides back on. Okay, sorry about that. I forgot to turn the camera back on. I have the bottom screws for both sides put in, and one of the top screws on the other side back here. I have to finish putting the top two screws in, and you can see here I had to have two free hands to get everything lined up. Now I can close the lid, and it should help to tow it in, but it does take a tremendous amount of force to get the sheet metal back into its original position, because this is heavy gauge stainless steel sheet metal. So I'm going to pause it, put the last two screws in, and then we'll insert the pieces, the upper insulation pieces in, and then it's just a matter of putting the brain back in. So hang tight. And so now we have the brand new burn chamber. And I will not obscure anything from you guys, I did enlist the help of a clamp to pull the front and back together so I could get the screw holes lined up. And that gave me the third hand that I needed, but we made it through. And so we've got the burn chamber, and the rebuild kit always comes with a top, and they ask you what size crucible you're going to use, and I never know, so I just had them send me a blank because I will cut my own hole. It might need a little bit of trimming, which you can do with just a knife. It doesn't take a lot to trim these, trim this material down. It's very easy to cut, and this will fit down in there. I'll drill whatever size hole I need for whatever size crucible I'm going to use, and I will have it rebuilt. So now we're going to go ahead and close this up because we're going to install our new thermocouple, i.e. thermostat, and I want to make sure that the connectors, the leads, are facing forward to the front of the furnace, and I want to just slide this right in like so, and the hole should line up. Yep, the holes line up just fine. So I'm going to get a regular long screwdriver because these lips overhang and my drill won't fit. So hang on just a second. Okay, got my long snap-on T-handled ratcheting screwdriver. I'm going to put the screws in. You don't want to over tighten these too much because they are porcelain. The thermocouple base is porcelain, so you really don't want to over tighten them. And as with anytime you're installing anything, you just want to get each one started before you, in case the holes don't line up perfectly, you want to get each one started before you tighten either one down. And so now I've got them both started. I'll go ahead and tighten it, and really you just want it snug. You're not going to crank it down, because you crank it down, you'll crack that ceramic, and you don't want to do that. And so the last step is to put the brain back in, and so I'm going to wipe it down real quick, and then we'll put it in. All right, so I cleaned it up a little bit. It is just about due for a new fan. They're an 80 millimeter fan. You can buy them. They're a brushless 80 millimeter fan. You can get them on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. The originals were black. This one's like an orange and green, and it glows when it runs. So, but it's starting to make noise, which means it's time for a replacement. If I'd have thought ahead, I'd have gotten it for this, but I'll do that on the next episode. So, of this old furnace. So we're going to slide that in from the back, because that's how it came out. We're going to line up the holes. We're going to tilt it on its side. This will take a little bit of finagling until you find the holes, get the holes lined up. And there we go. There's my holes. So I'll put my screws in with my handy dandy trusty Craftsman. Well, you guys can't see. That's the trouble with sometimes doing this on camera. There we go. And get them all started before I tighten them down. It doesn't sit all the way on the bottom of the legs, and so you don't want to assume anything. And now we'll start the other side. Just turn this bad boy over. She's been real faithful. Me and Mrs. Jones got a thing going on. She's been real faithful over the years. I'm a big proponent of getting to know your equipment, so that if you have to make repairs, you're not dependent on somebody else. And so that's when I first replaced the fan. I didn't want to have to send it anywhere. I just wanted to do it myself, so I did. All right, now we can go ahead and snug them down. All right. I should really have that torque setting a little bit lighter than that, but I don't. Okay. All right. And now we'll go ahead and connect the wiring, which has now slipped to the back. Because when I pushed it in, I'll fish it out with a pair of needle nose. Remember, we got the front wiring that goes to the front here, which is the little tiny leads, just like so. And for this part, now that I'm done working on the inside, I'll take these nasty gloves off so I can have a little more fine motor skills. But I'm going to want to loosen the end leads, because the inner two screws, they go to the thermocouple on the inside. And I'm just going to use my needle nose here to feed these in there so I don't get them broken. And I'll tighten that one down first. Just snugging it up. It's not a lug nut. We don't need to. And check it, make sure it doesn't pull out. If it pulls out, that means that you didn't get the screw on the actual wire, which is what you're trying to do here, is get the screw to hold the wire in place. So, okay, that one's good and tight. And I'll run the other one in with the needle nose. And I'm going to hold that one in place while I run the wire up far enough to where only the wire sheathing is showing. So, and they're both snug as a bug in a rug. And the last step we have to this little project, and if you're still watching, I really appreciate it, is to connect the coil. And these slide on real easily, which is why I always take the extra step of sort of crimping them down, because I certainly don't want those coming loose. I just give them a squeeze so they won't slide off. Yeah, good squeeze, and just a nice squeeze, and there you have it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is putting a new burn chamber, complete with a brand new, and you can move that just a little bit, with a brand new thermocouple and a new coil in a tabletop furnace. And so, and no, this was not a paid promotional by Tabletop Furnace. I bought the insert. I'm getting no compensation for this, except I just want to make sure that if I can help somebody else out there in the community who ends up having to do this, they know they can always reach me and ask questions. So in the meantime, everybody, pour safe, stack high. I appreciate it. Mr. Zeke from the Furnace Repair Bench. Cheers.